Welcome, everyone, to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you all here. Think of this as your foundational bachelor-level masterclass in anthropology and human ecology. Today, we're going to explore the incredibly dynamic, constantly evolving relationship between human populations and their environments. We are literally going to look at how we went from just barely surviving in the wild to completely reshaping the globe. So grab your notebooks because this is a truly fascinating journey. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our syllabus for the Explainer. First, we'll define human ecology. Second, we'll examine biological pathways of adaptation. Third, we'll cover the theories of environment relations. Fourth, we'll track pre-industrial modes of adaptation. And finally, we'll end with the urban and industrial shift. But before we get into the definitions, I want you to ponder a really pivotal question. How on earth did our early ancestors manage to conquer everything from the desolate, freezing Arctic to the sweltering, resource-scarce savanna? I mean, think about it. We don't have thick fur, we lack massive claws, and let's be honest, we aren't particularly fast. The answer lies in our incredible capacity for plasticity, both biological and cultural. Let's unpack exactly how that works. All right, Section 1, Defining Human Ecology. To really understand our extraordinary survival as a species, we must first define the scientific lens we'll be using today. So here is our working definition of human ecology. It's the study of the dynamic interrelationships between us and our environment. What I always love to point out to my anthropology students is the etymology here. The word ecology actually originates from the Greek word oikos, which literally translates to house or dwelling place. So when we study human ecology, we are quite literally studying humans at home in nature. We're looking at how we keep our house in order, so to speak. Moving right along to Section 2, Biological Pathways of Adaptation. Long before humans invented complex tools or built heated homes, our very bodies had to physically adapt to environmental stressors. Now, what's really interesting about this is when you juxtapose two famous ecological rules regarding human body size and shape. First, we have Bergmann's rule, which notes that populations in colder climates tend to have a larger overall body mass to retain heat. Then you have Allen's rule, which applies to our appendages. It suggests we develop shorter limbs in colder climates to prevent heat loss. You can see this contrast perfectly when you compare the shorter, stockier build of traditional Inuit people up in the freezing Arctic to the taller, longer-limbed Maasai people adapting to the intense heat of the Kenyan savanna. Nature physically sculpts us. And you know, the biological sculpting doesn't stop at just body shape. Our biology responds to a whole myriad of stressors. For high-altitude populations, like folks living in the Andes or the Himalayas, we literally see the development of larger lung capacities to combat hypoxia, which is oxygen deprivation. Skin color is another brilliant adaptation. Varying melanin levels act as a biological shield against intense UV radiation, while still letting in enough sunlight to synthesize vitamin D. And nutritionally, well, genetic quirks like lactase persistence evolved in populations that relied heavily on dairying, suddenly allowing adults to digest milk. All of these traits evolved out of direct, unyielding environmental necessity. Okay, on to Section 3, Theories of Environment Relations. As we evolved, our primary survival mechanism shifted from slow biological changes to rapid cultural ingenuity. In the field of anthropology, there has been a massive ongoing debate over exactly how much the environment controls us. Environmental determinism is an older 19th century view, arguing that the environment strictly dictates and shapes human culture. But that's incredibly rigid, right? A much more modern view is environmental possibilism. This theory argues that yes, the environment definitely sets limits, but it's human ingenuity and technology that ultimately dictate our culture. The environment offers possibilities. It doesn't just hand us a pre-written script. So the crucial point here is captured beautifully by the French geographer Paul Vidal de Lablache. He stated, "Nature sets limits and offers possibilities for human settlement. But the way man reacts and adjusts to these conditions depends on his own traditional way of life." This single powerful idea was a massive paradigm shift in academic thought. It moved us away from that rigid determinism and finally allowed us to see humans as active agents, rather than just passive victims of their geography. Building on this, prominent anthropologists like Franz Boas and his student A.L. Kroeber really championed this idea of possibilism. They emphasized that a society's specific cultural history, along with diffusion, which is basically the sharing of ideas between cultures, allows humans to completely overcome geographic barriers. A fantastic modern example of this is the Inuit. historically limited by the freezing Arctic, right? Well, through the diffusion of modern greenhouse technology, cultivation is now happening in one of the harshest physical environments on Earth. And this brilliantly illustrates another major theoretical framework, the ecosystem approach, famously studied by Roy Rappaport. Consider the fascinating cycle of the Tsimbaga Maoring people in Papua New Guinea. When their local pig population grows too large, it exceeds the environment's carrying capacity, and that leads to intense competition for food between the humans and the pigs. This tension triggers the Kaikui ritual, which is a massive festival involving the slaughter of pigs. But here's the thing, this isn't just a party. It acts as a cybernetic feedback loop to restore ecological homeostasis, making absolutely sure neither the humans nor the environment are destroyed by overpopulation. We also have cultural materialism, a truly fascinating perspective developed by Marvin Harris. Harris looked at religious tenets and argued they often mask deeply practical material survival strategies. Take the Hindu taboo of the sacred cow in India, for example. Rather than just being a symbolic belief, Harris argued it was actually a vital ecological adaptation. During periods of intense environmental degradation in ancient times, it became economically and ecologically smarter to preserve cattle for their milk, their manure for fertilizer, and their mechanical energy for plowing, rather than just slaughtering them for a single meal of meat. Culture serves survival. Shifting gears now to Section 4, Pre-Industrial Modes of Adaptation. Let's zoom out to the macro scale and see how these adaptive frameworks actually played out over human history. To reduce your cognitive load a bit, let's quickly map out this chronological progression. This is the timeline of our technological and societal expansions. We start 2.6 million years ago with hunter-gatherers. We move to horticulturalists around 9,500 years ago. We see the rise of nomadic pastoralists by 1500 BC. And finally, we hit the massive spike of the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century. Let's break down these pre-industrial modes. First up, hunting and gathering. It is absolutely vital to remember that this represents a staggering 90% of human history. Our ancestors utilized simple stone tools and remained highly nomadic to track megafauna. But the absolute game changer here was the mastery of fire. Cooking softened our food, which literally altered our biology. We developed smaller teeth and much shorter digestive tracts. Most importantly, it freed up calories and time, allowing for the massive brain growth we see in early hominids like Homo erectus, while also providing firelight for crucial social bonding. Eventually, we see the rise of horticulture, which is essentially simple gardening supplementary to foraging. A key adaptation here is slash and burn, or swidden cultivation. For example, the Yanomami of the Amazon organically manage incredibly poor nutrient-deficient tropical soils by burning brush to create a layer of fertilizing ash. They farm it for a few years, and then they strategically rotate to let the forest recover. This era also allowed for the very first semi-permanent mud brick dwellings like those found in Cattle High Oak. Then we have pastoralism. This is a highly mobile adaptation found mostly in arid grasslands, where traditional farming is just impossible. Pastoralists possess profound ecological knowledge. They practice something called transhumance, moving their herds based on complex seasonal cycles to find the best forage without destroying the environment. The Wadabi people in Niger, for instance, are known to selectively guide their Boro Zebu cattle to feed on over 40 specific plant species across the dry savanna. And that brings us to agriculture, the Neolithic Revolution. By utilizing plows and animal traction, humans could suddenly produce a massive surplus of food. And surplus is everything. It allowed for permanent settlements, unprecedented population booms, and the true division of labor. Because not everyone had to farm anymore, humans suddenly had the free time to invent mathematics, writing, complex standing armies, and centralized governments. Let's move to and see how this all builds into Section 5, the urban and industrial shift, the era we're currently living in. The Industrial Revolution was a total paradigm shift for our species. We moved rapidly from agrarian economies into machine manufacturing. By mastering the use of fossil fuels, particularly coal, we triggered an unprecedented, exponential growth in global population. We radically changed our relationship with the Earth, pushing our numbers from the hundreds of millions into the billions in the absolute blink of an evolutionary eye. This industrialization drove us into cities, and cities have a really profound dual nature. On one hand, they act as incredible nexuses of human culture, offering reduced transport costs, centralized protection, and massive technological innovation. But on the other hand, they trigger severe environmental consequences. gentrification, immense resource extraction, and entirely new stressors like urban heat islands, where dense concrete and vehicle exhaust literally raise local temperatures by several degrees, actually altering local climates. Which leaves us here today. We are now in the Anthropocene, an era defined by human impact on the planet. I want to end today's class by asking you a final, vital question. As we continue to heavily manipulate our environment, building megacities and altering global climates, what will the next phase of human adaptation look like? How will our biology and our culture adapt to the very ecosystems we have engineered? Really think on that. Thank you so much for joining me today for this explainer. Class dismissed.